Good evening and welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. The big story that we are tracking, exclusive details on the situation along the line of actual control across the Ladakh front. NDTV has gained access to a lot of detail on what exactly is happening, and the bottom line is that the situation in South Pangong, which has seen a great deal of tension in the last several days, can take any trajectory. However, the possibility of peace and dialogue at all levels does remain. These are a few details that we have. A detailed write-up will be appearing on ndtv.com in the next little while. What we will now share with you are exclusive details, some of which never before reported, of the situation on the ground. Firstly, there is a sense, and this is the big takeaway, that given the standoff between India and China, this standoff could take any trajectory. The possibility of a clash, a larger clash, cannot be ruled out. This will mean that there is a price to pay on both sides. Now, what else have we actually picked up? Let's move to the next slide over here. A new military move by India, not on the south bank of Pangong we've been talking about, but on the north bank, along this line of actual control which China has imposed on us because they don't let us patrol in areas we want. India now dominating the Finger Four area by positioning ourselves above the Chinese. This deployment on the Finger Four heights has taken place in the last couple of days. The distance between Indian and Chinese soldiers just a couple of 100 meters. If the Chinese were to try and go above Indian positions once again, they would be operating at altitudes close to 20,000 feet. Physically, that's extremely difficult, if not impossible. On to the other areas, and one of the key points that came up was, when do Indian soldiers actually retaliate if the Chinese keep coming up the ridge lines armed with these spears as they have? These images from day before yesterday in South Pangong. Well, there is a red line and there are robust rules of engagement. If the Chinese come up and they actually breach the barbed wires that Indian positions have, then Indian soldiers will retaliate with force. That's another key point that's come up. Let's move to the next. And this is again something which the government at the highest levels now believe, that the moves by the Chinese are controlled by their top leadership, not exuberant military commanders on the ground. It's all thought and planned. Let's go to the next point. The next detail over here is, again, a broader government understanding. We don't understand why the Chinese are opening so many fronts. These are all the fronts that they've opened, not just in the Ladakh region, but they've got issues with Tibet, they've got issues in the South China Seas. And why are they opening so many fronts right now? What else have we learned? Let's move to the next couple of points. In the context of a modern potential conflict or clash or dominance, air power essential. The Chinese have deployed 150 plus aircraft and helicopters in the theatre, obviously on their side of the line of actual control. India is matching the Chinese presence on the ground, and in the air, 1:1 is what we have learned. Let's move to the last couple of points over here. This, in fact, is what I started on, and this, I think, is how we really should end. The point is, India wants peace, we want dialogue, because if there is a clash, there will be a price to pay on both sides. And many more details of that exclusive report will be out on ndtv.com in the next little while. One of the key points that we have learned is that both India and China have agreed to hold another round of Lieutenant General level meetings, the date of which has not been fixed. Remember, the foreign ministers of India and China are likely to meet in Moscow later this week. Will that result in de-escalation, given the huge numbers of soldiers on the ground of both sides, not just all across the Ladakh frontier, but also in South Pangong, where there could be between 5,000 and 7,000 Chinese soldiers in that area? We have a fantastic panel tonight, but first, a very special guest, General V.P. Malik, the former Army Chief. Great to see you, General Malik. Is it your concern that we have reached a point in terms of the situation in South Pangong, de-escalating from which would now be difficult?
Good evening, Shom, Vishnu. No, de-escalation is always possible if there are the talks that take place between the two foreign ministers. They come to some kind of a result uh, to de-escalate. So it's not that de-escalate is not possible. It is possible, but of course there will be certain conditions, mostly from our side. Why I'm saying mostly from our side is because the whole issue was started by China in a very deliberate manner, and I think the start point was when they decided to induct two divisions, which were earlier on an exercise, and then they were inducted to be able to uh, occupy the area which were earlier considered to be disputed areas. And that was a unilateral decision that they had, step that they had taken. And thereafter, of course, we had to take some steps looking at our own security, particularly in the area of Chushul. Uh, Also, I would say that they were the first one to breach the talks protocol that was decided. That is how, in fact, the incident in Galwan Valley on 15th of June that took place.
Right. General, let
So
me ask you this.
yeah,
You know, one of the details that we've now picked up is that Finger 4, which is the line of actual control, because it's been imposed on us by the Chinese, it's not where we believe the LAC lies. Now Indian soldiers are dominating Finger 4 way up on the ridges. And what I've learned today is that for the Chinese to actually go beyond our positions would mean they would have to deploy at a height of 19,700 feet, almost 20,000 feet, which would be militarily very difficult, if not impossible. So the question is this: how our ability to operate at these crazy altitudes, something we've trained in Siachen and elsewhere for so long, how is that a potential differentiator in the capabilities of the two forces at the moment?
Vishnu, as far as north of Pangong Tso is concerned, first let's be very clear that Chinese have occupied the area right up to Finger 4. Earlier it was not occupied by them and we could patrol up to Finger 8. Yes, they have occupied a certain height on Finger 4, and now our troops have taken the initiative to go much higher than them. We have the capability of standing firm on these heights. We have the experience of Siachen as well as in Kargil. So as far as our troops are concerned, if they have gone there, I have no doubt that they can stand up to Chinese for some time, for quite some time. As far as the Chinese are concerned, if they decide to go much higher, the number will be much less and they will have logistic problem, which will be again a fair amount. So both north of Pangong Tso as well as south of Pangong Tso, it was necessary for us to occupy some good defensive position for our own safety security of Chushul in the south, and as far as Finger 4 and 2 are concerned, that is what our deployment at Finger 4 is indicating.
General VP Malik, pleasure to speak to you. Thanks very much, sir, for being with us. Well, joining us also at this stage, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni and Jayadev Ranade, the former Research and Analysis Wing Additional Secretary. Thank you both very much for being with us. General Kulkarni, I think a very important part of what we have learned is that our soldiers on the ridge lines are not fighting with their hands tied behind their backs. They've been given very robust rules of engagement. And the rules of engagement are, if the Chinese with their spears or their weapons, guns, actually try and breach the barbed wires along the ridge lines, which are defensive, perimeter defenses which have been created, then we will engage them. How is this change in the rules of engagement critical for India in maintaining our posture on the ground?
Vishnu, let me be honest with you. You know, the rules of engagement actually changed immediately after the Galwan incident took place, because all protocols since 93, 96 and beyond have actually been violated by the Chinese. We have been quite, I would say, in a situation where we would ensure that at least there would be no firing. But what happened now on the 7th of September, in which the Chinese have fired on their way to Razangla, and that is now the flashpoint. I think I would say the situation is extremely, extremely tense, and any small incident can lead to something which none of them wanted. Now, what happens on ground when the rules of engagement like this are made? You would find the Chinese will be continuously provocating, pretending to be, posturing, trying to pinprick, trying to poke as much as they can. But with the present terms of engagement and the rules of engagement that exist, that we can open fire and we should open fire. But at least now, say, even if I take the 7th September incident, once they were warned and once they were told, and they knew very well that they don't stand a chance of climbing up the Razangla feature,
they decide to turn back, retreat, and go back.
Okay.
They fired on their way back with the view to, trying to probably, wanting to.
General, one moment, we're just fixing up the audio sound with you. For the moment, I just want to go across to Jaydev Ranade. Mr. Ranade, when you're an intelligence expert, you've dealt with this professionally for so long. When one speaks about intelligence, one looks at all sorts of intelligence. There's human intelligence, there's electronic intelligence, there is intelligence by the air, intelligence on the ground, intelligence by sensors. Ultimately, do you not believe that our proactive moves in South Pangong were as a result of excellent intelligence at whatever level it may be, which resulted in us taking decisions? Intelligence means you have the ability to decide. And it's because of this that we actually did this. This could be a game changer for us.
Certainly, intelligence is vital, but it's not the only input that the army commander receives or the commander in the field receives, but it is vital. Now, this particular action that took place would have required pinpointed intelligence from the ground, from the sky, from the electronic means, for him to plan and then undertake the action. So you're absolutely right. Intelligence is vital, particularly in such terrain where human assets are not functional at this point in time.
Okay, General Kulkarni, is it your belief that the situation now is so tense that the possibility of a clash in South Pangong cannot be ruled out, or do you believe that the possibility of a clash actually exists in other areas along the LAC? We'll come back to him in a moment. I think there's a problem with the audio. Mr. Ranade, would you like to take that question?
Well, Vishnu, as the way I see it, we certainly do not want a war. The Chinese have massed these troops. They have brought in a lot of firepower. So the question is, why have they brought them? And I think we have to be prepared. The kind of statements that have come from them also indicate firming up of their position. So I think we have to be prepared. I can't say whether it will happen or will not, but certainly the tensions are extremely high, and the only possibility is if the top leadership in China does decide that war is something which is inopportune at this time, and it will backfire on them.
Okay. General, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah,
General
I can hear you.
Yeah. General Kulkarni, is it your belief that there could be a clash in some other part of the line of actual control, not necessarily South Pangong, assuming there is a clash at all?
Shom, 3,500 kilometers of LAC, where China is continuously probing all over. They are looking for a weak spot, and a possibility of a limited action and a weak spot cannot be ruled out. Because the very fact that they're mobilized in such large strength, they know the repercussions of what they're doing, and they're still willing to take that chance, and they probably feel that the world will forget of what they're going to be doing, and they just might be able to then be able to tell the world that India as a nation has been, shown or taught a lesson or something like that kind. So you will find that they're probing, but this probing, the very fact that the way the Indian army is deployed and the way they're getting it back at every place is indicative that they are now looking for an honorable exit. They know they cannot exist the way they have wanted to. They thought that India was the 62 frame kind of a thing. They knew that we had to improve, but they never expected that India would stand up so militarily, diplomatically, economically, the kind of sanctions that are coming on them, and militarily be able to stand up to them at all places, and in fact have beaten them. Right now, Chinese are on the back foot.
Okay.
But the way the Chinese are probing, you cannot rule out a limited action or jockeying for a strategic position somewhere along the LAC.
Bharat Karnad, what is your broader understanding or broader reading of the situation? Because there is a sense among top government officials right now that, look, these aren't, and this was told to me earlier today, that this is not exuberant local military commanders who are taking this decision. This is being managed or being overseen by top Chinese leaders at all levels. Is that what this is all about now? That this is something which is a larger issue for the Chinese in terms of the course they pursue?
Oh, absolutely. I think nothing that the PLA does is without the Central Military Commission chaired by Xi Jinping and their plan or their consent and instructions. There's nothing that happens, no matter, even at the subunit level. So the authority line is pretty clear and strong as far as the Chinese are concerned. But the trend path, I think, is not towards war, for the simple reason, as perhaps some other people might have said on the show. I've just joined you, so I didn't hear the thing said earlier, that I think they opened up far too many fronts, and having India as well, which is a fairly hefty proposition for them in military terms, because I think in a limited short duration war sort of a context, we are fairly well, shall we say, we are able to carry on and conduct such an operation if we so wish. But the Chinese, I think, with the, as I said, with all the fronts opening up that they have opened up on their own, perhaps being a little too confident of their own resources and their own abilities to manage the crises that they have, in a sense, precipitated, whether it's Taiwan, South China Sea, and now in Eastern Ladakh and all along the line of actual control. I think they will not be foolish enough. That's my reading. Whatever else Xi is, he is ultimately pragmatic. If you see his policies to date, it's quite possible, though, that he may be convinced by his advisors, military advisors, to believe that should they show down India in a very conspicuous sort of way in military terms, that it'll be a plus for them. That's the kind of attitude they had in 1962. And so, with the, if you recall Marshal Lin Piao in those days, with Mao Zedong and so on, they were, very much interested in cutting India down to size, as it were. And if that is what they have in mind, something analogous to achieve here, then they might, in fact, escalate, where they think they have an advantage. It cannot be southern Pangong area, but they are well entrenched elsewhere.
Right.
They might push the, buttons there.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank all of you very much for joining us. Lots of new developments by way of information today. But I think the key point, the big takeaway for me was that all across the line of actual control, it's a 1:1 as far as the Indian Army is now controlled. If the Chinese have deployed forces, we have matched them. If they bring in more forces, we'll match them again. And therefore, the situation is quantitatively and qualitatively different as opposed to what it was a few months back, when a lot of people say that the Indian Army, the Indian armed forces, were caught by surprise.